They're recording on this? Why is it calling?
Recording has started.
Yes,
Yes,
there we go. It's recording.
all right, the recording has started, so I, Jim McCarthy, would like to call this meeting to order. This is the executive board meeting of June 1st, 2023 of Metro Plan. So could we have roll call, Karen?
Good afternoon. We will begin roll call with the executive board members. Chair McCarthy,
I'm here.
Vice Chair Vasquez,
Present.
Coconino County Board of Supervisors, our member Horstman, member Aslan,
Here.
member Williams,
Present.
member Sweet,
Present.
All right, great. We're in good shape. Yeah, do the
and
staff.
then Metro Plan staff, Tim
Yes.
Worley. Present. Dave Wessel,
Here.
Manzia Gonzalez,
Here.
Sandra Tavel,
Present.
and I am Karen Muller and here.
Okay, great. Karen, do we have any public comment today?
No public comments.
All right,
We do have a guest with us, Ed Stillings.
okay. All right, the next item on the agenda is approval of minutes. This is for April 6th, for April 21st, and May 24th. Does anyone have any comments? I actually have one comment. So I'll make my comment. On the April 6th meeting minutes, it says that there was a request to table something. So I want to add the agenda item was tabled. That's item, I think it's C, general business, B, strike forward. Okay? Does anyone else have any other comments? So I'll make the motion that with that minor change, that we approve the minutes that I just listed the dates for.
I'll second.
Miranda Sweet seconds. Any other comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? All right, so those minutes are approved. The consent agenda this month, there is none. So moving right on to general business. The first item is ADOT Long Range Transportation Plan. We're going to move that to an upcoming meeting because Mr. Jason James ended up with a conflict today and cannot be here. So we'll do that one next time, hopefully. So the next item is strike forward, Regional Transportation Plan. Dave Wessel, I think you're going to kind of take the lead on this. Before you start, I just mentioned that the Technical Advisory Committee asked to have this moved to this month. And when I met with city staff this week, they asked me to thank the Metro Plan Board for allowing that to move to this month so that they would have time to do some detailed study and some follow-up, et cetera. So Dave, take her away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, members of the board. Next slide, please. So we went through this at the advance. We've done a lot of work. We have a final draft for your consideration today. We're looking for adoption. Next slide. This is the timeline. You saw this at the advance. We've been working on this approximately 2 years from the notice to proceed to today, with a lot of hard work by many parties. Next slide. As you know, this is a unique effort in that we really worked hard to explore the implications of the carbon neutrality plan through the upward concept. However, we are moving onward with our fiscally constrained plan, which implements existing land use policy as well as existing transportation projects and plans, such as propositions 419 and 420. Next slide, please. At the advance, I let you know that we'd be covering the public comment that we received and the comments from city staff that Chairman McCarthy just alluded to. So we'll go over those briefly in terms of comments received and our response to them. So we received about 40 comments from the public during the 30-day public comment period. One group of comments related to housing. There was support for mid-density housing as well as concerns for high-density housing. Although with some of those concerns were acknowledgement about the support of high-density housing for affordable housing. And our comment is that we're really supporting current housing plans to the extent fiscal constraint permits. So in terms of our financial investments, and that through upward we provide guidance for advanced affordable housing through land use and transportation plans and investments. This is basically the densification as well as the increased investments in walk, biking, and transit. Speaking of which, for transit, there were a number of comments for fare-free service and service to outlying communities. Very similar response in that we're supporting current transit plans and to the extent fiscal constraint permits, and that through upward and the land use plans and other strategies, we're looking at advancing transit investments. There was regarding fare-free service, Mountain Line is investigating the potential of a fare-free system. I'll mention that in the Transit Advisory Committee today, there was discussion of this, and that implementation is anticipated, or further consideration will be done in conjunction by Mountain Line with their consideration of a tax request for 24. So there'll be more on that in the future. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. There was a number of comments.
She's kind of new.
Bicycle.
Dave, I just said she's kind of new, you know.
Okay.
Go ahead.
A set of comments regarding bicycle facilities, their lack of connectivity, safety concerns, and maintenance, clearing bicycle lanes. Again, very similar response. Our current bicycle plans in terms of fiscal constraint and the investments outlined in the upward concept. Also noted that several ideas that were submitted exist in the active transportation master plan as adopted by the city. There were comments about electric vehicles, subsidization and installation of charging stations that we have in stride forward the electric vehicle readiness plan, including strategies our member agencies may consider. And then there were a number of comments about governance and the methods that we used for outreach. And the governance really dealt with people who don't support or don't believe in climate change and actions local governments are taking to implement those. The comment to them is that, you know, we're looking to implement and support current action, which includes the climate action adopted by the city as well as similar actions by other member agencies. As far as outreach was concerned, concerns over the methodology and whether we were actually capturing the public's perspective, and referenced our random sample survey and our ability or attempts to tie back into that survey and identify any skew from our online surveys. So that's the public comment. Before I go into the city comments, see if there's any questions or concerns from the board.
I'm not seeing any, Dave. I'd say go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Next slide, please. So we received comments from the city traffic section and the city community development department. The city traffic really asked for clarity on several measures, costs, methods, and effects of strategies. We responded to them with confirmation that yes, land use strategies will have a more long-term effect and not such an immediate effect. That we will have to do additional research on TDM strategy costs, and that we will look to do future technical addendum to add. They thought it would be helpful to have a traffic volume map in the plan and to discuss vehicle miles of travel on a per capita basis to make it more accessible to the public. So we'll be coming back to you with a technical addendum to address those things. From from community development, they really wanted to be sure of the clarity and distinction between onward and upward. That onward is what we are implementing as of this time. That upward is a concept without obligation, if you will. And so we worked with our consultant, Burgess and Michael, through a number of text and organizational changes to the executive summary to make those clarifications. I'm really thankful to the city for pointing those out. As we read through it again, we could see where there could be confusion, and we believe we have resolved that to their satisfaction. Their other concern was about the implementation of upward. And our response to them and the difficulties behind it, our response to them was simply that we were exploring the city goal, which is to achieve neutrality by 2030, and that in order to do that, really need to be very assertive in the approach. And I really couldn't really allay their concerns about implementation other than there's no obligation to do that. So those are the comments that we received both from the public and now from the city. Again, if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer those at this point.
Not hearing any.
Okay, then let's go to the next slide, please. So thank yous. We covered these at the advance, but here they are again. You all have been very diligent in your work here. Appreciate the help of the management committee and making sure that we're kind of walking the right line. A lot of technical help, as we've seen from our city members, from the technical advisory committee, staff. Mandia has been tremendous in helping with public outreach. And then you can see our firm there and the advisory group. So thank you to everybody. This is really an important occasion. I'm looking forward to the next slide. So as we know, onward is fiscally constrained and won't meet several policy goals, mostly related to carbon neutrality. We know that upward is not fiscally constrained. It is consequently very expensive, but will meet many of those policy goals. So at the end of this, my presentation here, what we're again looking for is adoption of the regional transportation plan by the executive board today. So with that, I'll end my presentation and again, take any questions.
Dave, I have a question. This is Jim.
Yes.
The last draft I saw said that Jeff Melbeck was our executive director. I think we can change that to Kate Morley. Is that been picked up?
That has not been picked up. Thank you for doing that. If it's adopted today, we'll make that change before it's posted.
Okay. Any other questions? Could I get a motion to adopt the Stride Forward Regional Transportation Plan?
I move to adopt the Stride Forward Regional Transportation Plan.
So Miranda Sweet made a motion. Could I hear a second?
Second.
Aronimo, was that you? Okay. So Aronimo seconded. Any further discussion?
Does that motion include your recommended change, Chair McCarthy?
Thanks for the clarification. Miranda?
Yes.
Miranda says yes. Geronimo, is that change all right with you as the seconder? Geronimo?
Yes.
Oh, you're nodding. Okay, that's good enough. So it's been clarified by the motion maker and the seconder that it does include Kate Morley's name on the document as executive director. All right, any other questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, that motion does pass with that minor correction. And thank you, Dave. Appreciate you put in a lot of hard work on this baby.
Thank you.
All right, so the next item is C, Transportation Improvement Program, TIP. Dave, I believe you're going to take the lead on this one also.
Oh, Dave just dropped off the meeting.
Oh, he thinks he's done.
He thinks he's done. Dave adopted the RTP and Dave is now taking the rest of the day off. If Dave doesn't come back, I'm happy to step in and fill this until he gets back. So the Transportation Improvement Program is required by the federal government to list all of the grant activities of the organization. We do major amendments periodically, but we often do more minor amendments, such as today, to recognize grant opportunities. So the first amendment that we're proposing is an amendment related to transit. So Mountain Line's been awarded $8.7 million worth of grants. These were competitive grants that they applied for. Those funds have been awarded, and so we need to move those items within the TIP so that Mountain Line can obligate that funding. The second item is related to a grant that the city is currently working on. It is a Safe Streets for All grant for the Butler Avenue Complete Streets Conversion Project. It's a variety of improvements, including permanently elevating the separated bike lanes, which is the solution everybody, I think, has agreed is the right solution at this point. It also includes three protected intersections and a beacon crossing at O'Leary. So that's very exciting. This would still be illustrative in the TIP, but support that application process. And then the third item is similar. This is a county item. They're going to apply for the Protect grant, which is resiliency programs or resiliency projects. This is related to 89 flooding. Dealing with some of the flooding that's occurring out there with detention basins and the impacts along the roadway. This is another illustrative item. The grant is due this summer, and this would again help support that application. So that's the basis of the TIP changes, amendments that we're recommending today. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And Dave did join. Oh, Dave did join. Dave is happy to answer any questions.
Well, Dave, sorry you missed most of that. Does anyone have any questions? So I guess, Kate, you need a motion to amend the TIP.
Apologies, I'm having internet issues.
No, I heard the word.
No problem, Dave. You're still cutting out, but don't worry, we've got it covered. Yes, we are looking for a motion to amend the TIP. As stated in your packet would work if you don't want to read the entire.
Right, I'll make that motion as stated in the packet with no changes that I've heard so far.
I'll second.
Okay, who was that?
Williams.
Tony Williams. Okay, thank you. Tony Williams seconded. I moved. Any further discussion? And thank you, Tony. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone
Aye.
opposed?
Aye.
And no one opposed, is that correct? So that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Kate, for stepping in.
No problem. Thanks to Dave for preparing all that information.
Yeah, so it's all teamwork, right?
Exactly.
All right, the next item is yours, Kate. That's a Metro Plan strategic work plan. And I guess what I've noticed, all these things kind of tie together.
They sure do. It's our last meeting of the fiscal year, so there is a intention to that, moving into FY '24, which is unbelievable. It's already June. So the strategic work plan, we talked about at the advance last week. We read over all the feedback as a group and have incorporated a couple minor changes into the strategic work plan that we're suggesting. I will acknowledge, historically, Metro Plan adopted a 1-year strategic work plan, but planning activities often take multiple years. So we've moved this to a 1 to 3 year strategic work plan. It's a little bit higher level, and then it's going to complement with the Unified Planning Work Program, the UPWP, which is the next item. That gets into a little bit more detail on specific projects. So we're kind of, the next 3 items, we're going to flow down in scale. Essentially, we're going to do the strategic work plan. Then we're going to talk about the UPWP, which gets into more detail for the next 1 to 2 years, and then the budget that we need to support that. So it will flow. So similar to last week, goal 1 is, and this is, I will say, oh, sorry, Supervisor Vasquez. Oh, okay. Thought you were interrupting for a second. Goal 1, and these are numbered for the ease of saying the goals, but they are not in any priority order. Maximize funding for transportation projects and programs. This is similar to what you saw last week with 4 objectives around being more strategic rather than proactive with grant seeking, expanding our match and revenue generating options, having a more coordinated legislative approach when it comes to transportation between the partners, the city, the county, ADOT, Mountain Line, and then just ensuring that we have good standing with our funders, so that way we can keep receiving the funding that we have. We've suggested several key performance indicators that we would report back to the board on an annual basis. So this time next year, we could present to you how we did this year and continue to move these things forward. So that's goal 1. Are there any questions or comments on goal 1?
I just want to make a tiny correction. We're moving from reactive to proactive.
Thank you.
So just for the record.
Okay.
What did I don't even know what I said. Thank you.
You said correctly.
Oh, thank you. All right, seeing no questions on goal 1, I will move to goal 2. Deliver plans that meet partner and community needs. This is the core function of what Metro Plan does, in that we do transportation planning. We want to continue to build trust through reliable and transparent project management processes that our partners can rely on and know what to expect. Expand the inclusion of disadvantaged community members and organizations in the planning process. This is one we've modified a little bit based on feedback at the advance. We've been more clear that we're talking from setting priorities through the planning process, through implementation. I think that was a little bit of feedback we got, is it's about engagement beyond just the planning process, but what are the grants we're applying for? What's being prioritized? How are we implementing them? So wanted to recognize that. We also added a new objective related to data that came up a lot at the advance. And so we want to fill gaps in transportation data and make data accessible to the public. And then finally, implementation has been a key item in our listening tour of partners. So we really want to make plans that are implementable and usable by our partners. Again, we've got a couple key performance indicators that we can track and bring back to the board a year from now. Any questions on goal 2? Okay. Goal 3, build Metro Plan's visibility in the community. This is related to building our brand and making sure the public understands the benefit that we bring to the community. That's actually objective number 3, help explain what we do and what our value is. Going back to the top of the objectives, we want to educate, inspire, and empower through our planning processes. And we want those processes to be engaging, dynamic, holding public events, holding demonstrations. So really being out there in the community. And number two is work on our branding and marketing through more traditional media forms, such as, well, I guess social media may not be considered traditional, but it might be at this point, print and digital materials as well. Again, a couple key performance indicators, and I'm happy to answer questions on this one. All right. And then the fourth area, goal 4, is implement programs that encourage mode shift. This gets back to let's conduct some community-oriented multimodal demonstrations, showing people what's possible in the community. That actually came up quite a bit in the AHA exercises that we did at the Advance, a very common one. People liked seeing the work that was coming out of, I believe it was Manhattan, Kansas. Implement programs at K through 12 schools to reduce parent and pickup drop-off. I will say I have floated this to FUSD, and they are very excited about collaborating on it. And the final one, educate the public about economic health, congestion, climate equity, and all the other benefits of reducing car trips. We do want to be clear, we're not suggesting that cars are going away at Metro Plan, just how can people think differently sometimes or take a different mode sometimes. So those are our objectives under goal 4. Yeah, and that is it. That is the whole 1 to 3 year strategic work plan, and it's attached in your packet, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And we are looking for a motion.
We better move on this then. Well, I'll move that we adopt the 1 to 3 year strategic work plan.
I'll second.
And Miranda Sweet seconded. Any more discussions or last minute questions? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that motion passes unanimously. And thank you, Kate. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
And you're up again.
Yeah, all right, the Unified Planning Work Program. This is a document required by both FHWA, the Federal Highway Administration, and ADOT to explain or show how we're using the federal funding that we're receiving, ensure that there's compliant uses, and have transparency in that process. The UPWP is a 2-year document. So this is, we went from a 3-year strategic plan, now we're at a 2-year work plan, and then we'll get to our annual budget. So what is a UPWP? We just talked about it a little bit. It has some required components as well, and so we'll walk through those, but we need to be able to explain in several different categories that are set forth by ADOT and FHWA how we're spending the federal funds that we receive. So my slideshow today will mostly focus on changes from the last UPWP. Other things are carrying forward. As I said, planning processes can take a while. And so there are things that we're still wrapping up from the last UPWP. So under the organization management section, we've done some basic administrative changes, updating titles, acknowledging additional staff that we have, and adding our Montoya Fellow, which actually has existed for quite some time, and the potential for 2 AmeriCorps interns, which you will see are included in the budget. The idea there being that they may be able to help with all the demonstration events that we put on in the community. Work program, the admin section. We've added grant administration activities more clearly. We now have our grants planner, and so we're doing more of that, so I wanted to be more explicit. It also references Title VI and DBE. New sections that are in the admin category, we're going to work on updating our internal controls. We have hired an administrative assistant and clerk of the board here with us today. Thank you, Karen. We are considering a contract for financial services with that change, and so that's something we'll work on. And then also developing that legislative priority or legislative agenda. So that's new to the work program as well. Under the data section, we always collect traffic counts and maintain functional classifications. We're continually trying to improve the model and make it better. New sections this time under data, developing practices around our VMT calculator and really making that tool work. That's our vehicle miles traveled calculator that we partnered with the sustainability section at the city on to create as a way to update the traffic impact analysis process, or the way we look at modeling in the region or priorities. Also recognizing we want to adopt and monitor performance measures, and that we're going to work on a lot of safety and crash data. We have 2 safety plans going on, and so that will be a priority data area for us. The TIP, we just talked about what that is. Some things we're going to work on related to the TIP this year is developing redundancy in the TIP, and the STIP process is the state version, that's the S. What that means is Dave has been managing these processes for a long time, and we'd like to make sure that there's a robust team here that knows how to manage them, so that way we have succession planning and resiliency built into the organization, since this is a required function. We also want to develop a list of all the capital projects in the region. This doesn't exist, actually. We have projects identified in many different plans, so let's consolidate them and then really work on a prioritized list for the whole region. And then, of course, we'll amend the TIP as needed, as we just did, to recognize grant opportunities and grants that are coming in. The RTP, this is the Regional Transportation Plan. We just adopted it 10 minutes ago, maybe, so that we don't have a lot of work on developing a new one, but we do want to work on implementation of those stride forward concepts that Dave mentioned earlier. Special projects, this is the big section of the UPWP. This starts to get more into specific planning projects of the organization. On the left-hand side, you see things that are being led by our partners that we have a role participating in, be it we're providing traffic modeling, or we're sitting on a stakeholders committee, that they're asking for our expertise as transportation planners. On the right-hand side are things Metro Plan is leading. Some of these have already kicked off. That would be the West 66 plan, the Milton M180 plan, the Regional Safety Plan, the SS4A plan, the Creative Local Match Plan. Those things are all already underway. So 2 new ones, getting the transit into code study kicked off in partnership with the city and Mountain Line. We had a great meeting with them yesterday. And then also our transportation demand management program that we just talked about, and working on that K through 12 mode shift and demonstration projects.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
You listed Highway 180 in Milton as we being lead. I thought the state was lead on those.
Good question. I should clarify that. So these are ownership studies. ADOT owns Milton and a large portion of 180. And they also, actually, I should have framed this broader, because the study that Dave is leading is going to look at all the roadways within the region that ADOT owns, to consider who should be the right owner and what is the reasons for that. There are financial implications to who owns in terms of maintenance, but then there are benefits in terms of the ability to control the design of that roadway. ADOT can have some very strict standards. They're oriented towards highways. That can be hard when you're trying to implement things in an urban environment to do the kind of design that you want to do. So there's trade-offs. So Dave is going to look at those trade-offs, the costs of the trade-offs. We're not going to make recommendations. It's more of a white paper for the jurisdictions that may want to talk about ownership to base those conversations on. So that's it came out of the Milton and 180 plans over some of the conflicts we saw over what the local jurisdictions wanted compared to what ADOT could do under its own policies and procedures.
Thank you.
There are 2 other sections of the work program, environmental and capital. So these will be capital purchases, and so over $5,000, and then any environmental studies we're doing, and we don't have any of that planned at this time. Everything fits in the other categories. So that is the overview of what's in the UPWP, really highlighting the 2-year work plan for the organization, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? So I'm not hearing any. I presume you want to adopt.
Please.
So you want to adopt the Unified Planning Work Program for fiscal years 24, 25.
Yes.
I'll make that a motion.
I'll second.
And Miranda Sweet seconded. Any last minute discussion or questions? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes. And now the third leg of the stool, so to speak, is the budget.
Exactly. So drilling down, we're recommending approval of the FY 2024 budget totaling $2.8 million. This is the last meeting of the fiscal year. So I will just say if there are changes to be made, we are happy to do that, but we may need to call another meeting before the end of the fiscal year. So just wanted to make sure people were aware there's no more meetings. I have just a very brief PowerPoint that shows some of the changes between last fiscal year and this fiscal year for reference. So on the revenue side, we have actually a 35% increase in revenue, and there's a couple of reasons for that. Mandia was successful in getting us a competitive grant for the SS4A project, the Safe Streets for All project, the vulnerable users study. So that's one-time revenue that's coming in. Mountain Line also has 2 competitive grants, or submitted 2 competitive grants that are actually awarded to Metro Plan. So in collaborating with them, there's also several $100,000 in both of those grants. So there's some one-time funding that's making up the major difference in the revenue side of the budget. You can see in the chart below, I have FY23 revenue sources, so formula funds versus competitive funds, and then local revenue, and then the FY24 pie chart. And you can see that that orange slice, the competitive slice, has really increased, so representing the grants we just talked about.
Good work.
Yeah. I wish I could take credit for it all. Big kudos to Mandia, and big kudos for Estella Hollander at Mountain Line, who wrote those grants. So it's great news.
Teamwork.
Yeah. Expenses by category. So running through, we typically categorize into 4 categories: salaries and benefits, operating expenses, travel, and then special projects category. So again, I've got the FY23 amended budget and then the FY24 budget for comparisons for you. There's actually a 7% decrease in spending. So we have a 2% increase in salaries and benefits. That Mountain Line, we follow Mountain Line HR policies at Metro Plan through the IGA that was established with Mountain Line. They're doing a 3% increase, but due to some of our restructuring and some salary savings, we're only seeing a 2% increase in the salaries and benefits line of the budget. We have 154% change to operations. That's a big change, but there are some reasons for that. Some of the plans that we just talked about competitively, we're planning on delivering in-house. So, we might have instead of hiring a consultant to do public outreach, we're doing public outreach in-house. So you're seeing some of that that might have been special projects now be operational budget items. The largest line increase is the public outreach line item, and it has about $100,000 increase, which is significant. That is related to the idea of doing the demonstration projects and public outreach events. So if we're doing demonstration projects that require maybe temporary bollards, planters, painting material, currently Metro Plan doesn't own any of that stuff. And so we would expect to make some purchases to buy equipment to be able to host demonstrations. We may also need to do things like apply for temporary use permits from the city, things that also have expenses there. So that's why that's such a significant increase. We haven't done this before. We don't really know what those expenses will look like. But the $100,000 feels like it gives us the capacity to kick things off and get us started. So that is a major change.
Quick question on the outreach. Are we doing anything this summer with festivals and all the activities happening?
We don't have anything planned on the calendar currently. I definitely have I'm watching things happening for next year, thinking about what we could be involved with, thinking about the bike parade this weekend with Hullabaloo. How can we participate in those things? We did have a stronger presence with Bike Month last month, and we did the Earth Day event. So I'm looking forward to those things. We're actually working on a grant right now that I was going to talk about in a little bit. The Bloomberg Asphalt Art Grant, and that would be something that we could work with FALA, Creative Flagstaff, to do a traffic calming piece with the Cheshire neighborhood on Fremont Boulevard. That's come to council several times. That neighborhood's really been requesting Fremont be right-sized. It's 4 lanes. There's no reason for it to be 4 lanes. So how can we repurpose some of that asphalt out there? So that would be something that probably wouldn't happen this summer. So we are working towards things. I know the Downtown Business Alliance has reached out, talking about some demonstration street closures they would like to do. How can Metro Plan assist with those things? So that's kind of what's on the radar, but I think we need the transportation demand management planner, and then really to have the time to plan events. So I think we'll see a lot more next summer. It was a very long answer, sorry.
I like hearing all the fun stuff.
The budget also has a 20% increase in travel. We're hiring, the last budget included the grants planner and the TDM planner. They're just coming on board. Sandra's been with us for several months. We hope to get the TDM planner on board here shortly. So there is an increase in the travel and training budget to recognize more staff and make sure that we have the funding to support their development moving forward. While it is a 20% increase, it's only $3,000, so it's not a lot. And then we have a 22% decrease in project that's related to not having the RTP going on, not hiring as many consultants. A lot of those things fell into the special projects category. And as I said, there's been a little bit of shifting towards operations as we do more things in-house. So with that, there's a 7% savings in the operational side of the budget. So you may notice our expenses and our revenues don't match at this point. We have more revenue than expense. So what are we going to do with that? We've got about $700,000 in federal surplus in this budget, but ADOT allows us to essentially loan that money to ourselves in the future. So in my budgeting process, I've been very conservative in the 5-year forecast about the bipartisan infrastructure law funding levels being maintained. I've assumed that the carbon reduction program would go away. Other funding levels are maintained, but that would be a significant decrease to us. Carrying some of this federal surplus forward allows us to have that stability into the future if some of those funds go away. Being that it's the first time so much money has been authorized, just don't have a good sense of how stable that funding is yet. We historically didn't do that. We just obligated all the funds, but we've also had huge amounts of carryover every year. This will reduce our carryover every year. We'll just plan for it in future years. And then I will say by FY 2029 in the 5-year forecast, we're not doing that. We're really just expending what we have. So it gives us that nice cushion into the future, but does taper off over time. So the 5-year forecast, this takes I projected forward for 5 years with a 3% increase on any unknown items. So just assuming across the board every year a 3% increase, unless I knew that, for example, every 3 years we do traffic counts, and I would plug traffic counts in 3 years. Again, I assumed no renewal of the carbon reduction program, and that we also didn't receive any other competitive grants. And that we had Mountain Line cash for several funds that they already are giving us cash for. So those competitive programs that they're receiving money for, they pay a cash match. So those are assumptions within the 5-year forecast. We are sustainable through the 5 years, and I believe into the future past that with this budget scenario. And so am recommending the board adopt it today. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions? Well, I don't see any. You must have done a good job, Kate, or they read the packet ahead of time. Would somebody like to make a motion to adopt the 24 budget as presented and in the packet?
So moved.
And was that Tony?
Yes.
Tony made the motion. Can you get a second? Thank you, Tony.
I'll second.
And Miranda Sweet seconds. All those in favor? I'm assuming there's no more conversation. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And is anyone opposed? Hearing none, that passes unanimously. Thank you, Kate. Now, luckily Dave is back because he has the next agenda item, which is delegated authority to execute grant agreements and for the Safe Streets for All grant. And I know why you're asking for this, but could you explain it to the board?
Yes, Mr. Chair, can you hear me okay?
Yes, great.
Excellent. So with any federal grant, when awarded, you have to enter into a grant agreement with the Department of Transportation. The grant agreement in this case is a fairly standardized template, outlines contact information for both organizations, Metroplan and the USDOT, reaffirms the scope that was applied for, as well as any adjustments to the budget, which there were none, and then some assurances to work towards equity and climate action, which are some of the priorities of the administration. So it's a fairly brief, I believe, 7 or 8 page document. We're looking for authorization for Director Morley to sign that. The process will be, we have a draft that we put together based on conversations with the Federal Highways Arizona Division. We'll send that to them, correct any comments, and then we'll sign it and send it off to, they'll send it off to USDOT. So again, we're looking for authorization for Director Morley to sign the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant agreement. Thank you.
And excuse me if you covered this, but I'll just say it again anyway. And I think one of the main reasons for this is that we're not going to meet again until September. So if we don't want to have to wait a couple months to do some, what's really just routine paperwork. So it makes sense to me. So I'll move that the board, any other comments before I make a motion? No. I'll move that the board authorize the executive director to execute the Safe Streets and Roads for All grant agreements with the United States Department of Transportation.
I'll second.
Miranda Sweet seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Any opposed? All right, that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it. The next item, and I think we're running on time schedule-wise, so we're going to keep moving down the schedule here, is a Creative Local Match Program update from Sandra.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk to you about Creative Local Match. Kate mentioned it earlier. So next slide, please. So what is Creative Local Match? It is, let me pause here, sorry. So Creative Local Match is a creative way to generate matching funds when we seek federal monies. There's a bunch of options out in the world, just a few: creating a rental car tax to where the revenues are geared toward transportation projects, philanthropic fund seeking, and impact fees, just to name a few. Next slide, please. So why are we doing this? So the bipartisan infrastructure law, the BIL, increased federal formula funds by 40%. So anytime that we seek federal formula funds in our transportation world, we have to match them between 5.7 and 20%. So if the feds are giving us more money, then we need more match. So anybody that wants to draw down those dollars needs more match. And also generating these options really diversifies our financial status and our ability to reinvest into the community for transit programs and transportation projects. Next slide, please. So this is coming out of a 5305E grant that was collaborated upon between MetroPlan and Mountain Line, and they won this planning grant in 2022, and this funds this project in response to the BIL, and that's why I'm here. So they hired me. I'm a planner, and I'm working on Creative Local Match along with a bunch of other cool stuff. So next slide, please. Who am I? I help our partners get funding. I really want to pay attention to, I want to pay attention to all of our partners and really honor everybody. And Kate mentioned the list of capital projects. So I want to really wrangle everything and make sure that we're really maximizing our dollars. And I love the bus. Next slide. And so I haven't been here that long, only 5 months, but I'm really finding that Flagstaff is small and mighty. And I really admire the Downtown Mile project because it has so many stakeholders, so much local match, so much skin in the game, and a tremendous amount of expertise and work. And really, Flagstaff is on the map. So what have I been up to in these 5 months? I do not have a transportation background, so I have been onboarding and orienting. I've been doing a lot of research and a lot of learning through my own research and my amazing colleagues. Next slide. So what am I doing about the Creative Local Match plan, right? So I have to create a plan, which Kate mentioned is a white paper. So it's what are ways that municipalities and organizations can create more local match with a replicable toolkit? And then another deliverable is I have to present at the 2024 ASTA Arizona Transportation Association Conference about my findings. I've created a timeline, I've created a list of options, and I flushed out 10 to talk to you today. And depending on time, I have 2 that I want to dive into, but then if you express interest in other ones, we can look at all 10. Next slide, please. So what are some examples? So there's developer impact fees, and I'll get into the details of those after this presentation. As I mentioned earlier, rental car tax fees, transportation utility fees, and transportation reinvestment zones. And this is all very complicated, and I want to highlight that these strategies are part of a bigger puzzle. So they fund things partially, right? So it's really good to have a bunch of options because they don't all pay for one giant thing. Next slide.
So, Geronimo, did you have a question?
I think he's speaking to somebody like in his environment. I don't think he's.
Okay,
Yeah,
go ahead.
thanks. So Creative Local Match, whenever you do new things or you implement new things, there are barriers, right? And something that I learned from my leadership here at MetroPlan is that barriers can become opportunities, right? So some barriers for Creative Local Match are legislation. Arizona has some pretty strict legislation around taxation, around developer impact fees, around other types of fees, right? And so we're also making a societal paradigm shift. Earlier, Kate mentioned that when we want to encourage mode shift, we're not stamping out cars, we are expanding the way that we move around in this town. And we're not eliminating, we're expanding. So really promoting that in our community. And then also the bipartisan infrastructure law is with the existing presidential administration. So we all know that re-election comes up in 2024. So will these monies get reauthorized or not? So these are some of the barriers to Creative Local Match. And what are the bright spots? Our bright spots are our barriers. Next slide, please.
The Arizona legislature.
So there are some towns doing really cool things around the United States. So at our advance, some of y'all were at our advance where Kate mentioned some aha moments with other MPOs. So there's aha moments in other towns in the United States, like Tampa, Florida, really utilize their impact fees to refurbish their city in about it took 20 years, right? So planning is a long game. So over the span of 20 years, they changed their legislation. In the most recent 5 years, they made complete streets and they really beautified Tampa using these impact fees. Oregon City, Oregon is using a lot of transportation utility fees, and that is based on who uses what mode of transportation and putting a fee in there to pay for these projects. So there's all these really cool ideas all over the United States around Creative Local Match. So if y'all have questions, I'm happy to answer them. And then after, I'm going to dive into my 10 fleshed out options. So I'm ready for your questions or comments.
I've heard you're working closely with the city on, like impact fees. There's all kinds of rules. You're kind of working with them on that and other similar things.
Yes, thank you for mentioning that. I've reached out to Rick Tatter and Michelle McNulty. And so my next step is I cast a wide net, and then my next step is to really narrow the road to figure out the relevancy of how it can be done here in Flagstaff locally.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen because I'm gonna show you the options.
Jesus, Sander.
Can you see my screen? Okay, so I'm gonna list out the options that I fleshed out, and then I'm gonna dive into 2 of them. And please, if you're like, I wanna hear more about this, or if you're like, no, stop, let me know. So I come from a philanthropic background. So I come from a public health and a museum background where we heavily use philanthropy to fund our projects. And I'm hoping to translate that into transportation. The second option is developer impact fees, as Chair McCarthy just mentioned. The other option is,
Is this what we're supposed to be seeing?
yeah, I'm listing them out and then I'm gonna dive into more detail. So
Right.
right now you're just looking at a boring old list, which is, I'm just running down the list.
Sure.
So the third option is a cannabis tax. So right now, cannabis tax revenue funds certain things, and can we enable the legislation to gear some of it toward transportation? There is something called a capital escrow account, which is kind of a funny way to move around your money to make it unrestricted. And I am speaking in layman's terms. So what I'm trying to translate these complicated banking terms into everyday language. And I am oversimplifying right now. So just a caveat. So a capital escrow account is taking your carryover and then putting it into a different account and then making it unrestricted. And there's a lot of strings attached. The other option is LTAF2. So this is the lottery tax that got eliminated. So we used to have lottery revenues dedicated to transportation projects, and that got eliminated with the recession. And then Maricopa County advocated heavily to keep theirs, but we don't currently have that. So what would it look like to reinstitute that? Rental car tax. We all know that there's so much tourism here in Flagstaff. What if we enabled registration? What if we enabled legislation to redirect some of that revenue to transportation projects? There's a state infrastructure bank. So states like can take their formula funding and put it in a fund to create like grants or loans. Then there's transportation reinvestment zone. So Utah has really done an amazing job of creating a transportation reinvestment zone where they take a parcel of land with 2 partners, one of which who owns the land, and creates a fee structure to collect revenue from the beneficiaries of that particular project to reinvest back into transportation. There's transportation utility fees. I mentioned this earlier in my PowerPoint that Oregon City, Oregon is doing this with their user fees. And we do some of that here in Flagstaff. And then the last one, which is kind of a contentious one, is vehicle registration fees. So right now, anytime folks register their vehicles, then some of it goes to the highway user fund. So it's like, there's some interest there. So now I'm going to move to my 2 fleshed out options because we don't really have time for me to go over every single one with y'all, even though I would love to. And this, we'll make progress as we go along. So let me share Bear with me just a moment. Okay. That is not being shared. Hey. Okay. I think, here we go. Philanthropy. So the wide world of philanthropy. So there's so many different ways to approach this, right? So there are really big time corporations that are actually mandated to split some of their profit with the charity set, right? So there's big companies that have to do that. Then there's big organizations like hospitals and banks that have to reinvest into the community. And then there's individual giving, right? It's cultivating a donor base of wealthy people in your area that want to donate to transportation. So we're really looking at a landscape here. So we're assessing who is wealthy, who gives to what, and then what are the corporations, what are they doing? And then what are some of the big businesses here in Flagstaff and how do they reinvest into the community? And they don't always do it with money, right? So something that was mentioned at the advance pretty frequently that was an aha moment for MPOs is bike shares, right? Some MPOs across the country do bike shares. And Citibank, for example, has a really strong bike share presence in New York City and Oakland. And I'm hoping to take some of these strategies and scale them to Flagstaff because we're not NYC, we're not Oakland, we're not trying to be that. But do we have opportunities to cultivate bike share here in Flagstaff using by cultivating these corporate partnerships? Then there's private partnerships, right? There's a big wide world of philanthropy. And you know, you can get big money this way, you can create unrestricted funds this way, you can get a lot of, like the bike share is a huge thing. So there's a legal framework, right? These are kind of structured out to like, what is it? What does it do? What is its purpose? And then what is the legal framework of what are the legal barriers to getting there? So, you know, transportation and planning agencies accessing funds through philanthropy is a relatively new thing. So what are the legal ramifications here in Flagstaff, here in Arizona to do that? This brings up the idea of MetroPlan applying to be a 501c3. So being a 501c3 is a special tax designation for a nonprofit that enables you to receive funds from foundations. So Kate mentioned earlier, the Bloomberg Asphalt Grant is a $25,000 grant that for folks that get awarded have to be a 501c3, which currently MetroPlan is not. So would it behoove us to explore that option to give us avenues to more money? So some barriers, culture, right? So I come from a museum background in New York City where, you know, you have folks giving these like gigantic endowments and people that like love the arts. So where are the wealthy Flagstaffians? Do they care about mode shift? Do they care about giving? You know, who are they and how do we meet them? And then also paradigm shift culturally for going after philanthropic monies in a transportation setting is new. And then, of course, the rules. I mentioned the rules. What are those? And then I want to make a projection about how much money could we be collecting here. And I think that is case by case based on need and project. And then public acceptance, right? Like I think the public would really be into this, right? Because we would be seeking creative ways to create revenue for our region and for our transportation. So pros, it creates new funding streams. Cons, barriers, there's the barriers that I mentioned. And then, so how do you do this, right? So this is a big wide world and these are just high level steps on gauging interest, like who's interested, what corporations can we make partnerships with, what wealthy individuals can we befriend, devising a strategy, right? There's really clear strategies on how to devise this stuff, individual giving, corporate giving, etc., institutional giving. Engaging board members. Do our board members want to do this? Is there an interest? Assessing individual wealth, creating outreach lists, tracking, email. It's a lot of marketing. And then applying for grants, right? So this Bloomberg thing that we're doing is really exciting because if we get Bloomberg money, then this puts us on the map and Bloomberg can be like, oh my gosh, Flagstaff, how about that? And then it opens the door to more fund seeking. And then of course, hosting events and then fundraising events and things of that nature. So that's philanthropy in a nutshell. I know I'm talking a lot, so should I stop here or should I get into do you guys want to get into developer impact fees or should we move on? Because I have, you guys can read on your own time and what have you.
Well, I know developer impact fees are very restricted on what they can be used for
They are,
under
that's true.
state law.
That's true. Did you write my one pager?
I've experienced that on council for a few years.
Okay, so maybe I will just go over it really quick because part of what I'm learning here is that although some of these strategies might not like work in Flagstaff or work in Arizona, part of my deliverable is to make it replicable for other states. And also these kinds of things can really inspire some change making, right? So yes, Arizona legislation can be strict in some areas, but what if this goes back to our legislative strategy of what if we band together? What if we recruit our electeds and we're like, we really care about this, so help us change it, right? Because like not all laws are good laws, right? So developer impact fees in a nutshell, this is a really complicated universe, but basically if you have a economic development opportunity and then you hire a developer to build your project and you charge them this one-time fee to then pay for things like maintenance, operations, and things to keep your project going, right? So that's in a nutshell what it is. And there's all these rules and all of these puzzle pieces to consider. And Chair McCarthy is correct in saying that Arizona has a very strict development impact fee law. And if folks are interested in doing that, there has to be a nexus study because you have to prove that collecting this fee is a legitimate, logical thing to do. You can't just be like, oh, this is the fee and that's it. You have to demonstrate that the fee is proportional to the project and that you are indeed reinvesting it into something worthy. So there's a bunch of steps. I won't go into it. I know I've been talking for a really long time, but I was really drawn to this because some members of the city of Flagstaff are really interested in exploring this. And I think it's really exciting. It's like 2023 and like, let's make some change. So that's all I have. Let me know if you have questions or comments.
So those are your two, the philanthropy, like your two
that I talked about today, but then I mentioned 8 more,
Yeah.
Like cannabis, rental car, TUF, transportation utility fee. So there's
Okay.
more. And if your ears perk up and you're like, I want to meet with you about this, please. I have a stakeholder list. This is just like the tip of the iceberg.
Okay.
So if anything caught your attention, I'm happy to flesh it out with you.
This is thinking outside of the box. I like that.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any other comments or questions? I'm not hearing any. Well, thank you, Sandra. That was very interesting.
You're welcome.
All right, back to Kate, I guess. Items items from Metro staff. Go ahead, Kate.
Items from, all right, got the slides back. This is just a very brief staff report, not things that we need to talk about unless the board is interested in talking about them. We had an update on conflict of interest statements, which you should have received an email from Karen requesting your signature, so please sign. Or if you didn't see it, let us know. And then there's also a brief legislative update in your packet. That's all I have on this one.
Could you be brief? All right, so not seeing any questions. Next item is Kate again, happenings.
So happening at Metro Plan, this was a report that we added at the last packet. The idea is to be communicating what's happening at Metro Plan and also things that will be happening. So that way partners know what we should be collaborating on or the light bulbs go off about, oh, they're at Earth Day. We can put information out, vice versa. So just trying to be more transparent about the things that are occurring. I know I said this at the advance, but again, just want to welcome Karen to the team. We're excited to have her today and appreciate, she's gotten a lot done in 10 days, and very appreciative to have her on board. And then I just wanted to highlight grants. There are other things in your packet you can read as well. But there is a lot going on with grants at the moment. We're definitely putting an emphasis there. So Arizona Smart Fund, we know the city was awarded $3 million. We're currently working with the county on 2 other applications. One will be heard by the State Transportation Board this month for design of a new Belmont interchange. That's been a problem for a long time for the county, the I-40 interchange at Belmont and the impacts to the residents there with the truck stop. And then also looking at a Smart Fund application for the US 89 project. So the county is going to apply for the Protect grant, and they can apply to the state to help pay the match for the Protect grant. So we'll work on those applications with them. Speaking of the Protect grant, we've agreed to take a lead role in writing that application for the county. This is new for us as well. Some of the feedback on our listening tour was MetroPlan does a great job of telling us what grants are out there, but I'm an engineer and I have no idea how to write a grant. So we're going to try to assist them with these things and take on a stronger role with grant writing. So we will help them significantly with the Protect application. Same with the Safe Streets for All grant for the Butler corridor, taking a lead role in writing the narrative of that grant application. The city is still doing the data pieces. There's a lot of work there too. So a nice collaboration, I think, on that grant. And then finally, we've mentioned a couple times now, the Bloomberg Asphalt Grant. There's a picture of one of the grant opportunities in front of you. It may look very similar to things you've seen in the Manhattan, Kansas demonstration projects. And so is there an opportunity in the Cheshire neighborhood? FALA is very interested. That seems to be a great collaboration, that there's an art school located adjacent to the site. There's also strong interest from Creative Flagstaff in partnering. And as Sandra mentioned, we need a 501c3 to receive the funds. So Creative Flagstaff is interested in that. And F-Cube is interested in partnering as well. So there's a lot of interest in pursuing this project and doing something exciting that would be a demonstration to the community about what's possible. So those are some of the exciting things happening currently.
So in summary, you're small and mighty.
Yes, I heard that from someone else.
I love that phrase. Something about that phrase I love.
Yes.
Any questions on any of this? No? All right, so the next one, it has your name on it here, but this is to see if anyone had any future agenda item requests.
Yes.
Does anyone have any future agenda item requests? No. Mocus.
Where they can be submitted at any time.
All right, so I think the next item is negotiate the executive director's contract.
Yes, so we'll need to move into executive session. I believe Jeff Dollins is with us. Jeff, can you confirm your presence?
Yes, I'm here.
Great, thank you.
You're from Mr. Kavanaugh's office?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
I work with Mr. Kavanaugh.
All right, so what we're gonna do is stop recording.
Okay, so before we do that,
Yeah.
I'll move that we move
Oh,
into
thank you.
executive session. Gotta get a second?
Second. Sorry.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Okay, so you can stop recording. We're going into E-session. And while